Hello, good day, one and all. I hope that you are well. This is Alan from Alan's Leadership Edge. Hopefully, you've recognized my face now, you recognize the voice. I hope that you're doing well. I hope that you're able to enjoy the sunshine. I hope that everything is well with yourselves. Today is another day that I'm doing the podcast. Again, YouTube on Spotify, trying to mix it around a bit so you're able to see my face. If you haven't seen my face already, head over to YouTube, you're able to see me. Today is an episode that is close to my heart because it is something that I make a lot of repetition about in sessions and coaching sessions and everything else. But I'm a big believer in this topic today because I think that it really does pay dividends to people, to managers, to colleagues, to direct reports. It really does pay a lot of dividends to really make an effort to do this in terms of what we're talking about today. And today it is about effective communication. Effective communication is a great thing for me. I really enjoy talking about it. I enjoy trying to highlight to people the importance of effective communication. And I bring it up a lot in sessions. I do a specific training session around effective communication. It's really about identifying what effective communication is. Now, depending on where you listen, depending on where you read, lots of people will have lots of different ways of acknowledging effectively what I'm saying today, but it will identify it in their own way. So some people will recognize some communications as information and some as communication. And effectively, what it's saying is what I'm going to be saying today, but they're just using different words for that terminology. So usually where you read it, whatever you read, however you read it, there's a similarity between them, but they might just use different words. So today it is about effective communication for me. And I really want to delve into thinking about how effective communication differs from communication and really being able to get the most out of our communication and making sure that people understand from that communication what needs to happen, if anything needs to happen. So I think really the key thing for me to identify with is when I talk about this, when I look at sessions, there's always that difference between communication and effective communication. So some people will refer to communication as information and the effective communication is communication, but it's the same thing. The principle is the same. And what I'm trying to get across today is exactly the same with that. So for me, there's one real difference between communication and effective communication. And there's loads of different definitions. Communication is information that's passed between one or more people, two or more people, to get a message across using different mediums, different methods of communication. The difference with effective communication is everything that was said for communication happens, but it's been understood. So that's the key difference, is the understanding. So I like to refer back, whenever I talk about it, I refer back to my third podcast, The Power of Words, because as I've done before, I shamelessly do it. I can't help myself. But I do refer back to previous podcasts because I think they all relate. I think they all have a common ground, a commonality between them to really get the most out of people. So I do draw people back to episode 3, The Power of Words, because within that I talk about communication and effective communication. And in that podcast, I did say that I would go into it in more depth, which is why we're here today. So people will often talk about wanting to communicate or get a communication out. I need to communicate to so and so. And that is fantastic. You know, I really understand that. I get that. I'm 100% behind that. And I understand when people say that they want it to be understood. They want people to go away from that communication saying, yes, I know what I need to do here. If they say to me about open communication or clear communication, I know that that's again what they're meaning. They want it to be effective. They want it to be successful, and they want people to get out of it what they need to get out of it. However, for me, we're not challenging ourselves enough because with the Power of Words episode, what I talk about is trying to change that inner monologue, trying to change that inner dialogue that we use with ourselves to really challenge ourselves to make the difference, to really push ourselves to a different level. And this is one of them. This is probably the biggest one that I really try and push in any session, because everyone will come back with, you need to communicate openly. You need to communicate clearly. And I love it. I love it. I love it. I know that they mean what they're trying to say in the sense of it being effective. But for me, where's the challenge to say to yourself, is it clear? I mean, if you want to say, I love you, that's clear communication. You know, it's right there. It's written, it's spoken, it's clear. But is it effective? Has that person understood what it is that you're trying to say? So instead of saying to ourselves, I want to be open in my communication, I want to have clear communication, I want you to challenge yourselves to actually say to yourself, a way to communicate effectively. Okay. Or I want to get an effective communication out. But put the word effective in front of it or behind it, obviously, so it makes sense. But put the word in front of it or behind it, and you're going to challenge yourself to think, is this going to be understood? Now, to make sure communication is understood, we need to do many, many different things. We need to potentially look at barriers that might be there. We need to look at the methods that we're using, the mediums we're using. So is it email? Is it a meeting? Is it a phone call? Is it a text? Whatever we're doing, we've got to think about the medium that we're using. So we've got to think about the feedback channels. Is there an opportunity for people that we're communicating to feed back to us? Yeah, to feedback, to challenge us, to question us, to actually say to us, look, I'm not too sure of this, or I think that there's something else we could be doing. Because if you don't have those methods in, if you don't have those opportunities for people to feedback, to challenge, to ask questions, to get things wrong potentially, then what you're not going to be doing is communicating effectively. And when we don't communicate effectively, the problem is that information can be misconstrued. It can be misunderstood. It can be misinterpreted in so many different ways. And there are many examples in today's world whereby it is just a one-way communication. So I'm communicating to you, and a lot of people could actually say, well, what you're doing, Alan, is just communication. And I'd have to say, to a degree, you're right. But what I've done is I've tried to give enough information so that people can understand it. But I want to try and also create that environment where people can question it, they can challenge it, they can ask me questions about it and say, look, I'm not 100% sure in this. Can we put some time in to go through it? Of course we can, absolutely. It's about the methods that you put in for people to come back. So you need it to be a two-way channel, two-way process. The media is another good way. Yeah, we don't always have that opportunity to challenge or seek clarity or gain further information when we're watching the news or listening to the radio. We can't always get that information. So there are a lot of times where it is a one-way communication. But I think that within business, large, medium, small, whatever it might be, I really think there is always that opportunity for us to communicate effectively. And I think that as human beings, we become complacent in what we do. We become complacent in how we do things. And we've done it this way for ages. We're going to keep doing it this way because that's the easiest way for it. Sometimes we don't reflect. We don't use our emotional intelligence, self-awareness, self-management to recognize what our preferred method of communication is. You know, have a think, just reflect for a second, just pause the video, just have a think. What's your preferred method of communication? Obviously, most people will say, oh, it's always face to face. Brilliant. But then go and order. You know, what do you use more often? Because you don't always have that opportunity for face to face, particularly in this day and age with Teams and everything else. So many remote workers, it's very difficult to have that face to face. So do you prefer emails? Do you prefer phone call? Do you prefer a Teams call? Do you prefer a Teams chat? Whatever it is reflect on what you prefer. because I wouldn't say 9 times out of 10, but a majority of the time we will revert to what's best for us, because that's how we like to communicate. That's how we like to receive communication. But we need to be able to reflect on those around us using, again, our emotional intelligence, that social awareness, that relationship management, and just thinking about how other people like to receive those communications. If you're communicating to a large group of people, you need to try and be as inclusive as possible. Yeah, as inclusive as possible to really get people that chance to get involved, to really get that chance to be involved in that communication, so that they're fully aware of what's happening and they're able to draw feedback, they're able to give things back to that. But with a lot of this challenge and being able to question and just doing it in general, I'd love to draw you back to episode 5 of the podcast, which was around psychological safety by Amy Edmondson, to really allow for feedback to be challenged, effective communication, to be challenged. So to allow for effective communication, I should say, to really be challenged, you need to have psychological safety. You need to be able to let people freely speak their minds within reason. Obviously, it's got to be professional, it's got to be justified, it's got to be reasonable, but actually we need to be able to let people feedback. We need to let people speak their minds and bring their points to the table. And what we need to be able to do with that is actively listen. And actively listen, you would probably think, well, it's just about your ears, but actually you've got to read and understand what's being said. If it's via email, you've got to interpret information. Stephen Covey says a great quote is that we listen to respond, we don't listen to understand, or something along those lines. But it's a really poignant piece for me, in the sense that too often we don't listen to understand what's being said to us, or that communication that's coming through to us. We just listen to respond. So if we want to be able to give some effective communication to a group of people, and then we want to receive feedback back, yeah, that works, then actually we need to be prepared to listen, actively listen to that. And when you think about listening, there are, again, many different forms of listening. If you Google it, you can literally come up with so many different types of listening. When I talk about listening in my effective communication workshops, I do like to talk about 4 stages of listening, or 4 levels of listening. The first 2 being passive, and it's almost like a triangle, but the bottom 2 are passive. And the first one is very much what's known as cosmetic. So it's cosmetic listening. It's on the surface. It's possibly nodding at the wrong places. That happened to me before many times, but you're not in the wrong places, or you're shaking the wrong places. Then it goes up to conversational. So you're there, you are listening, you're engaging in conversation, you are nodding in the right place and saying yes in the right place, but what you're not being is fully present. You're not present in that moment to really give that individual the time that they need to be able to fully understand what's being said. Those are the first 2 parts of the stages, the levels. Then it goes into active kind of listening, and the two next levels are known as active. So the first two are passive. Sorry, the last two are active. The third one, so you've got cosmetic listening, conversational listening, and then the next one is active listening. Now, this is probably the most common one that people have heard about. This is probably the most common one that people are aware of and will try to use in their day-to-day lives. And I would always say that this is a good level of listening for people to try and get to. It's a good level whereby you're able to make an impression, you're able to make a difference, you're able to really show an individual or a group of people that what they're saying is being valued and you're listening to them. And I emphasize the word listening because there is a difference between hearing and listening, and I'll touch on that in a second. But after active listening, what you then have is empathic listening or empathetic listening or deep listening. It can be called different things, but the key thing here is that you are doing everything within the active listening. So you're fully present, you're summarizing, you're asking information, you're asking for clarity, asking questions, you're really there, you're really engaged. But the deep listening is now looking at emotions. It's looking at behaviors that come off the back of what's being said. So just think, how often have you heard somebody say to you, yeah, I'm fine. But everything about that is saying that's not the case. The tone doesn't match what they're saying. The body language potentially doesn't match. And whether you're listening to this on Spotify or YouTube, you'll be able to see a slight difference in what I did there. But even on Spotify, where it's just audio, you'll hear the difference. So it's about actively listening, but then looking at that next level, the feelings, the emotions, the behaviors. It is amazing to listen like this, and the levels of respect and trust and rapport that you can build on with people is phenomenal. It is genuinely amazing. But I will just give a word of warning to you all, is that if you do look at using that empathic listening or that deep listening, just be mindful, because it is mentally draining. You're putting a lot of energy and effort into that conversation, which is key. It is needed sometimes. But if you are deliberately and intentionally looking to do that in all of your interactions, you're going to suffer eventually. So as a word of advice, I say to people, always go for active listening. Active listening should be the very basic, the bare minimum of what you need to do and how you need to interact with people to help that communication be effective. Where possible or where needed, I should add, it's about empathic listening or deep listening. But it's about that step up to it in the right time, in the right moment, recognizing the need for it and getting the most out of it. I did mention a moment ago the difference between hearing and listening. No doubt you are aware of it, but I just wanted to highlight on it. Hearing is just an act where we hear noises. Okay, we hear noises all the time. We hear the birds chirping. We hear cars passing by. We hear trains going on the train tracks. We hear buses go. We hear all these different things. To listen is a skill. To listen is to really be able to hone in on what's being said, focus on what's being said or the noises that are being heard, and being able to identify with that. So being able to listen is much better than hearing. And I even go again back to my episode 3, apologies, but not really, because I think it's a great episode. But going back to episode number 3, the power of words, even in there, I mentioned about the difference between hearing and listening. Don't tell people that they're heard. Tell people they're listened to. Just using that word can have such an impact on somebody because actually it means so much to them. So give the power of words to people and use those words. So I stress to you to actively listen wherever you can. Make that your constant. Where needed, go up to deep listening. Okay, go up to empathetic listening. But where possible, just remember, try not to talk about, I want them to feel heard. I hear you. Actually really say, I'm listening to you. Yeah, it's really about you are listened to, you are valued. So it's a really big thing to be able to kind of identify with that. I've mentioned there are going to be quite a few different elements that have come into it to make that communication effective. Another one that I just want you to think about, just to reflect upon, is the barriers to communication. So there are loads of barriers that we face on a day-to-day basis to communicate and to communicate effectively. But if we plan what it is that we want to do, then actually we are in a much better position to overcome those barriers, to try to mitigate those barriers. So if we really think about what it is that we're trying to say, what it is that we're trying to get across, then actually we can start thinking about the barriers. Now, those barriers can be vast. There can be many of them. It can range from the attitude of the person or persons that's receiving the communication. It can depend on the method, mediums that you're using. It depend on your attitude, your enthusiasm, your genuine desire to get that message across. It can be down to the time of day. It can be about how you're getting this information across. Is it death by PowerPoint? Is it death by graphs? Is it death by Excel? What is it that you're trying to do? Have you looked at how people like to get information, how they like to take that information on board, and actually how to utilize that? You may not have done. So think about what those barriers could be. Think about the people, your audience that you are communicating to. Because if you recognize and consider your audience, then actually you're in a much better position to communicate effectively. If you know you're going through, say, redundancies, or you're going through changes or restructures, whatever it might be, to go out to an organization, to a team, and say it's all going to be okay, it's going to be fine. Actually, that's not always the case. That's not how people are going to perceive it. That's not how people are going to be able to overcome it. So you're not looking at your audience. You're not recognizing who those people are and thinking, well, what is it that I need to tell them? It's not what do they need to hear, because actually sometimes we just need to hear everything's okay, but it's not okay. What we need to be told is the truth, transparency, authenticity. We need to be able to be given that information for us then to be able to ask questions, to give challenges, to give suggestions on how to overcome it, how to avoid things. But this is all effective communication. This is what we need to do as people, as leaders, as managers, to really get the most out of us and other people. So I want you to challenge yourselves. So I'm just looking at the recording there. I want you to challenge yourselves, and I want you to think about your communications, and I want you to think about, are they effective? Now, you will possibly reflect on them and say, well, yes, actually, my communications are effective. In that case, what I would challenge you to do is to put the word effective in your communication, just to keep checking that they are effective. Because the chances are you have only checked it because maybe I've suggested it, and maybe I've asked you to reflect on it. How often do you reflect on your communications? You will reflect potentially on its effectiveness. So has it been understood? Are people doing what they're doing? But sometimes we don't. We do become complacent. So thinking about the what, the when, the how, the why. One thing I'd like to just leave you with in terms of effective communication is that one of the most powerful things that we have in a conversation, whether it's via email, Teams, text, verbal, whatever it might be, questions have to be one of the biggest assets that we have. The right question can get the right information. You probably remember that I'm very big on the why. Using the right questions will help you get to that why. If people haven't understood your communication, and this is where you need to reflect, have they been understood? Have they not been understood? Don't just cherry pick the ones that have been understood, because that's easy. That is easy because they were understood perfect. It's the ones that haven't been understood that I want you to look at. I want you to really focus, and I want you to really think about how or why they weren't effective. Now, you may not be able to understand that. You may not be able to come to the identification or the conclusion as to why this communication or these communications haven't been understood, why they haven't been effective. Sometimes what you need to do is to go out and get that feedback. If you've given the opportunity for people to feed back to you, then you're creating that culture, that environment where people are going to be happy for you to ask for feedback from them as well. Sometimes getting feedback can be difficult, but what I stress to people is that if you seek the feedback, you're in control of that. You're able to drive what it is that you're asking, so therefore you're driving what kind of information it is that you're getting back, and that can make the difference. So really reflect on your communications, past and present, even future if you're that far ahead of yourself. Just think about your audience. Think about what channels have you got it, or what channels have you got in place, should I say, for it to be effective. If you don't have any, put some in. If you have some but people aren't using it, maybe you need to think of a different way. Maybe you need to think of a different way to get that communication out or to make that communication effective. It's very easy if you've got somebody in front of you that very much prefers a Teams call or face-to-face. Brilliant, have that. How are you doing? Everything's great. Let's have a chat. Let's have a boogie. Blah, 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 blah. Follow it up with an email. Equally, if somebody prefers an email, send an email. Follow it up with a call. Just wanted to go through the email. But if you do that, just make sure that you give them time to reflect on that email and that they really are aware as to what's happening and what it is that you want off the back of that. So there's lots of ways for us to get this information across to make sure that we are communicating effectively. But ultimately, folks, we need to know our audience. We need to give channels for it to be understood. The last theory I just wanted to say to you in terms of getting to know your audience and asking people how they like to receive communications, you're going to start reducing what's under the surface of that iceberg. And if you remember the iceberg theory, it's a big thing. I'll probably do another podcast on that one separately. But it's really important to recognize that the values, the experiences that people have, the way they like to receive communication is sometimes under the surface. And they don't wear the heart on the sleeve. They don't tell people openly how they do that, how they like to receive communication. So that's under the surface. If you want to bring it to the top, ask the question. It's a very simple question. Ask it. How do you like to receive communication? Once you have that information, you can go, you can move, you can work with it. So really do please reflect on your communications. Are they effective? Are they non-effective? If they are, then think about why they're effective. If they're not, think about why they're not effective. But the ultimate challenge for you is to challenge yourself to put the word effective in front of or behind the word communication. So whenever you say, I want to get a communication out, say, I want to communicate effectively, or I want to effectively communicate. However you use it, however you say it, for me, doesn't matter, but you need to get that word in it, whether it's effective, effectively, effectiveness. Just use the word, because it will get you to challenge yourself. It will get you to think about what you've got in place. It's a big thing for me, and it will probably crop up in other podcasts just as emotional intelligence does. And I've got no doubt in future podcasts I will be referring back to this episode. But I really do hope that you're able to reflect and think about it. And as I've always said in every podcast, anybody that's met me, I want nothing but the best for people. So if you want help, give me a shout. Yeah, let's have a conversation. Let's see what can be done. Let's see what's needed. But sometimes it starts with effective communication. It's effective conversations. Okay, it doesn't have to be face to face, doesn't have to be Teams, email, comment, whatever it might be. I'm here. Okay. For now, folks, what I would say, as I always do, trying to make it a thing at the end of each podcast, I hope that you stay well, keep learning, and keep growing. Thank you.